My name is Andy Coley, and welcome to this second of two webcasts all about working collaboratively. And in this one, I'm sharing with you the Disney strategy. Now, this is a strategy that I use so much when I'm helping teams and facilitating collaboration. Now, I'm a trainer of neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. And this model was created within the field of NLP exactly for collaborative working and thinking creatively. And so really what I'm sharing with you here is the NLP process for Disney strategy. And it was born through the work of Walt Disney and his Imagineering team. And it's really important when it comes to collaborative working that everybody gets that sense to be acknowledged and heard, either yourself and or the rest of the people that you're collaborating with, either stakeholders, now they could be partners, they could be customers, they could be suppliers, or it could be members of your team. You can even use this process on yourself for a bit of self-coaching. And it's 4 different ways that you can look at a project or a problem that you've got that enables you to kind of step back and take different points of view. And that means everybody feels heard and everybody feels acknowledged. Now, in the first of the webcasts that I did, I looked at 4 different tips for working collaboratively. And one of them was empowering people and getting engagement. And that's what this is all about. So what are we going to cover today? First of all, what is the Disney strategy? Why is it important to take different perspectives? How to use each of the different 4 points of view for yourself and the projects? And a case study, an example of something where I've used this within the NHS for a project for a team where 2 organizations have merged together. So this was really inspired by the work of Walt Disney. He was a creative genius. You know, who else decides, I'm going to make up this massive theme park, put a castle in the middle of nowhere, and people are going to flock to it. And we're going to put characters in costumes. They are characters, by the way. I'm sorry to break that to you. You know, we're going to do all this, and we're going to create this big theme park experience, along with all the other work that he was doing. But one of the people that worked with Walt said there's actually 3 different Walts that walk into a room. And sometimes they can be the dreamer, he could be the realist, or he could be the spoiler. You never knew which one you were going to get into a meeting. And so what's curious about this is they actually harnessed the power of this and created an Imagineering team. So in the 1940s, the Imagineering team, basically the people that used to be able to blend the engineering and the imagination together. And they are actually now the R&D component of Walt Disney. And they're responsible for the design and construction of theme parks, the attractions, everything that the Disney Corporation does worldwide. They follow the principles of the Disney strategy to bring creative components to fruition. So first of all, what you have to do within any of these principles, when you're using this strategy, is set the scope. So what is the outcome of the project that you would like to have? What are you trying to achieve? Or if it's a problem, what's the problem that you're trying to solve? So first of all, you have to set the scope. Then, from the outside of that scope, the outside of the problem or the outside of the outcome, how is it seen from the outside? You know, how would a consultant or a supplier, a customer, you know, an external observer see it? What facts and data are there that are associated with it? What feedback information? What metrics? What's the problem analysis? You only spend a short amount of time looking at this from the outside, but it's basically the external data that gives you a little bit more amendment to the scope that you're dealing with. It's kind of the independent facts on the outside. Now what you do is you step into the creative points of view. So the first one is the dreamer. Now, the dreamer is all about the creative ideas and the passion. What's the big picture stuff? This is really letting your imagination run wild without any restrictions or any criticism. Yeah, you are really outputting creativity. And what do I mean by how do you do this? Well, get flip charts, write ideas down. What's the big picture? If you solve this problem right now, what would it be achieving? If you achieve an outcome, what would it be doing for you, for the organization, for your wider range, for the customers, for whoever's involved, whoever the stakeholders are, what will this be doing for them? Get really big, go really out there. Yeah? And what you're trying to do is output all of this dream, big vision stuff for yourself. So what do you want? What's the big picture? What if it worked? What if it really succeeded? What if we sold loads of this stuff? To really allow the dreamer to get big. Now, what do we do if the vision goes really well? How can we imagine the solution? What's the benefit of applying? Now, you will have a chance to get critical about it and to get it into action plans later. So dream really, really big. Cover flip charts, walls, post-it notes. Get all the ideas out. Because once you've done that, and you've taken a breath, You moved either yourself or your team into a next spot. You go into the realist zone. Again, the realist is about switching the thinking into a more logical planning style. And so you narrow down then the dreamer's ideas into a shortlist. Yeah, you then start to discuss that idea constructively. Now, typically, what you do is you take the one best idea the dreamers come up with, that your imagination, your creativity has created. During this stage, you then get the next set of steps coming through, an action plan starting to evolve. And so you go, right, how can I apply this idea into reality? What's the action plan to apply it? What's the timeline do I need? Now, how do I evaluate that this has been a success? You start getting that dream, you start getting into manageable action plan chunks. We're not going down into the individual actions of individuals yet. We're going into the key component stages to make this dream a reality. And then the critic, or the spoiler. So you go, right, here's a dream, and here's the bit that the realizers are trying to make into an action, the planners. Now, if I was being really critical about this idea, so applying some critical thinking to it, what might be the barriers to applying that idea, and how can I overcome those barriers? And in this session, what you're doing is trying to look to constructively critique it. You're trying to find the weak points. You're trying to really get in there and find out the things that might go wrong, having heard the action plan and what the dreamer wants. So what could be wrong with the idea? What's missing? What are the risks? What are the dangers? How can we not apply it? What happens if we don't do anything? And what are the weaknesses? And so really now what your critic is trying to do is trying to start to break it. And then what we would do, typically within sessions, is you cycle through the process. So the critic takes all of that stuff and the realist starts to do some things, and we go back to the dreamer. How does the dreamer think about that? And we end up with an action plan. Because you've come up with it from those 4 different points of view. The dreamer gets the vision, the realist, the critic, and the outsider all have their input as well. You start to cycle around and creatively come up with a final action plan that you can then start to break down into components and implement. Now, because you've done this as a team, you get buy-in from the team. And because your butters, your critics, have had the chance to have their opportunity, they've also joined in with the dreamer part and the realist part. And those action planners, your project managers, your implementers, because they know that they're going to be able to have input into the implementation, they can also be critics and they can also be the dreamers. So how would you actually facilitate this within the team? So initially, what I would do if I was facilitating this is to make sure that all the key players were there. You get your managers there, you get your suppliers into the room, you get everybody who has a stake in this project to be in that room and participating. And have an external facilitator, somebody who's not emotionally involved in the outcome. It's really important to have somebody who's a little bit external for this process. Only focus on one aspect at a time. So this can either be done in separate meetings or use your environment to switch. So what do I mean by that? You can maybe have 4 different areas of a big room that you move your team around. You could have 4 different flip charts. One person that I know does this process within corporate organizations is he gets the organizational team, he does this usually with the SLT, the senior leadership team, he gets them to walk in as dreamers, only allowed to be dreamers. Then when we finish that part, they walk out the room, get a cup of tea, and they walk back in as the realists. Do that part, have another break, come back in as the critics. Do that part, come back in, and then cycle back through the process. So he actually uses the environment to allow the team to cycle around those different processes. It's amazing how that little bit makes people change and they kind of know what mindset they're in the next time around. Be prepared for lots of information, particularly in the dreamer stage. So loads of information will come out. And often what that does, if you document it and put it down, is it gives you the ideas and the visions, the way that you can take the business in the future. Lots of things will come out that actually will start to spur and get people's brains ticking over about how they can achieve them. But then chunk it down into one key element you're going to work on first. You can always come back to the others. What's the first thing first? And remember, not take things personally. If they don't take your idea, the reason why you came up with it, your part of it, remember, it's our ideas and not my idea. So particularly at the critic stage, they're not critiquing you, they're critiquing the idea within the business for the stakeholders. So don't take things personally. And practice on something small first before building up to major projects. Finally, rapport and listening skills are key. If you're a coach or you have some sort of coaching skills, you've recognized that if you're in rapport and listening to other people's points of view, It's so important when it comes to facilitating and working within teams. And watch your butts. Yeah, that but word really does disempower a conversation. If you go, oh, I think it's a great idea, but my idea is this, you go, oh, we didn't like my idea after all. So just watch your language when you're communicating with other people, because it can really facilitate open discussions. So how have I used this? So quick case study, I did some work with the Royal Free Hospital. They just merged with Barnet and Chase Farm. And the issue was that the therapy services teams were expected to work cross-site now. So they had just been at the Royal Free and or just at Barnet and Chase. And so now they were expected to hop in a minibus and do appointments in different locations. Both those locations had slightly different systems, different ways of working, different structures, different ways of ordering supplies. All sorts of things had gone on. The issue for the management was, but we told them it's happening. We told them what's going to go on. You know, we stuck the letter up on the notice board for everybody to see. We sent emails telling them what was going to happen. What they hadn't really done was collaborate with them. So I turned up to run a meeting about handling stress and being more resilient. And then all this stuff came out into the room quite quickly. And because the manager was there within the meeting, I had a quick chat to her at the first break and went, okay, what I would love to do is this process with you. So instead, what I did for the next 2/3 of the day was actually the Disney process with them. So there was a team of 30 of them in the room, and they had people from cross sites and the management there and all the other administrators and people involved. So what I did was I got 4 flip charts into the room. And so in the first flip chart, we looked at the metrics, the outside part. What stats, how many patients are we seeing, what's the patient satisfaction score, so forth. Then very quickly move to the next part of the room. Dreamer, right. If this merger has gone really well, what is the big dream? What's it doing for you personally, for the way you feel when you come to work? What's it doing for the patients? What's it doing for our satisfaction scores? What's it doing for the way that we see this working within the trust? And then we got all of that big dream stuff out. And what when the communication is amazing? And then we went into the Realist and we started to do an action plan. The biggest component they took from the dreamer stage into the action plan stage was communication. Communication from the managers feeling like they weren't being listened to, and for the staff feeling like they hadn't been told. So communication was the key thing. And we break that down into actionable chunks because the staff were owning the ways they would like to be communicated with, and the management were there hearing it. And because the management had ideas and information they needed to impart, suddenly the two sides started recognizing they were both communicating, they were just missing the piece of communication, not in the other person's style. And then Critic, we went around what might go wrong, people not reading their information, not doing it. And so everybody then committed to take a part in that action plan. It made such a difference to the communication within the team. Everybody felt like they got everything out of the way. We kind of cleared the decks, and the merger had happened. We can't change the merger. It already happened, and it already been done in the way it's been done. But for the future, this is how the trust, and particularly the therapy services team, could communicate with each other. It made such a difference to them moving forward. Now, you can do this process with yourself. You can stand or sit in a different location for each of the aspects. You can think of a problem that you've got, like, how do I know I've got the problem? What would I do to solve the problem? What would be the big picture, and how can I put it into play? Or what can I do? If I'm coaching individuals, quite often, I will be working them through this process by getting them to sit or stand in different locations. So you can do that for yourself. Use a different book to write each thing down, different sheets of paper, whatever it is that you need to have a mindset of a different person. Just know that you're going to be in the critic, you're going to be in the thinker, you're going to be in the realizer. So allow yourself to dream big when you're doing the dreamer part. Ensure you're only focusing on each aspect, knowing that you've got that time, and have fun with the process. This works for small things to big major life changes. So have fun with the process, because it's such a brilliant strategy that really enables you to get moving with ideas and outcomes and projects. I've actually put this process on the IGD website that you can download, so you can follow it step by step, so either for teams or with yourself. And if you've got any other relevant questions or any other bits of information you'd like, obviously contact IGD and you can get hold of myself personally as well. So I've been Andy Coley. This is a webcast at IGD, and thank you for joining me today.